In the summer of 2025, the largest American naval force since the Gulf War positioned itself in the waters surrounding Iran. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, missile systems, a military grouping more powerful than anything deployed in the region in decades. Most people watching the news ask the same question: how did it come to this? The answer does not begin in this century. It does not begin with nuclear weapons or sanctions or proxy wars. It begins in 1941 with an invasion, an oil company, and a decision made in Washington and London that Iranians have never forgotten. This is that story. 1940, Iran is ruled by Reza Shah Pahlavi, a leader trying to balance his country between competing empires. On one side, the overwhelming influence of Britain. On the other, the growing power of the Soviet Union. Into this balance walks Germany. For Hitler, Iran is a strategic platform for striking at British interests across the Middle East. For Iran, Germany offers something attractive: advanced technology, engineering expertise, and the support of a power that is reshaping the world. Then, in June of 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union. Iran suddenly becomes critical, not as a battlefield, but as a corridor. The Allies need a route to supply the Soviet Union with weapons and equipment. Iran sits directly in the way. Britain and the Soviet Union don't ask permission. In August and September of 1941, Soviet and British forces jointly occupy Iran. Reza Shah is deposed. His son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, is placed on the throne. The new Shah immediately pivots. German advisors are expelled. The occupying powers are welcomed, and Iran aligns itself with the Allied cause. This arrangement holds until 1945. The war ends. Hitler is gone, and Iran quietly asks its occupiers, "When exactly are you leaving?" The Soviet Union, under international pressure, finally withdraws in 1946, but not before establishing two puppet republics on Iranian soil: the Republic of Mahabad in the Kurdish north and the Azerbaijan People's Government in the northwest. Both collapse the moment Soviet troops depart. Iranian forces suppress the separatist movements within months. The young Shah consolidates his position. He looks west. American and British capital flows into the country, and it flows, above all, into one place: oil. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, predecessor to what would eventually become British Petroleum, had been extracting Iranian oil for decades. The arrangement was simple. The company took the oil, sold it on global markets, and left Iran with the proceeds. In the late 1940s, that share amounted to roughly 9% of total profits. 9% for the country whose ground the oil came from. In Iran, anger had been building for years. Foreign companies occupied the commanding heights of the economy. The upper class connected to the Shah grew wealthy. The population outside that circle saw almost nothing. There were no social ladders to climb. The wealth flowed outward. Out of this anger emerged a movement and a man. Mohammad Mossadegh, a lawyer, a politician, a constitutionalist, and the leader of a broad coalition called the National Front. His platform had two pillars: economic independence and the rule of law over the rule of the Shah. On March 15, 1951, the Iranian parliament voted to nationalize the oil industry. On April 29th, Mossadegh became prime minister. The response from London was immediate and total. Britain imposed a comprehensive embargo on Iranian oil exports. Every major Western oil company joined. All British technical specialists were withdrawn from Iranian facilities overnight. Iran's oil production, which had been operated almost entirely by foreign engineers, collapsed. You wanted to nationalize? Fine. Now try to run it yourselves. The economic consequences were severe. Iran fell into crisis. Inflation rose. Unemployment spread. The country that had just asserted its sovereignty over its own natural resources could not sell a barrel of that oil to anyone. Mossadegh held on. In July of 1952, when the Shah attempted to remove him and appoint a loyalist as prime minister, the streets of Tehran erupted. Popular uprising forced the Shah to flee the country. Mossadegh returned to power stronger than before. But the economic siege was grinding Iran down, and in Washington, a new calculation was forming. Mossadegh, facing isolation and economic collapse, had begun looking east, toward Moscow. For Washington and London, this was the line. The Cold War was at its height. Iran sat between the Soviet Union and the Persian Gulf. Its oil fed the economies of Western Europe. Allowing Iran to drift into the Soviet orbit was, in the view of both governments, simply not acceptable. And so, in 1953, the CIA and Britain's MI6 launched a covert operation. It had a name: Operation Ajax. The mechanics were straightforward. Members of parliament were bribed. Street protests were funded and organized. A media campaign was launched portraying Mossadegh and his military allies as corrupt, dangerous, and dangerously close to communism. On August 19, 1953, a military coup led by General Fazlollah Zahedi seized power. Mossadegh was arrested. He was not executed. He was placed under house arrest, where he would remain until his death. The Shah returned from exile. All nationalizations were reversed, and the oil, Iran's oil, went back under foreign control, with one small adjustment. Previously, 100% of extraction rights had belonged to British interests. After the coup, 40% went to American companies. They had, after all, paid for the operation. This is the moment that everything changes. Not because of the oil, not because of the Shah's return, but because the Iranian people watched it happen. They had elected a government. That government had asserted the most basic possible right, control over their own natural resources. And two foreign powers had organized a military TOU to take it back. For the generation that lived through 1953, America and Britain were no longer distant powers with complicated interests. They were forces that would reach inside your country and remove your government if your government made decisions they didn't like. That understanding became the foundation of everything that followed. The Shah returned and ruled for the next 26 years. And in many surface ways, those years looked like success. Tehran in the 1960s and 70s was a cosmopolitan, modernizing city. Women in Western dress, bars and cinemas, American jazz. Frank Sinatra performed at a stadium concert to a packed crowd. Foreign dignitaries arrived in motorcades. The parties thrown by the Shah's court became famous across the world. Pierre Cardin designed pavilions at Persepolis, black caviar, champagne, guests flown in from every continent. But outside that world, in the provinces, in the villages, in the poor neighborhoods of the cities, a very different Iran was living a very different life. Illiteracy was widespread. Access to healthcare and education for ordinary people remained limited. The economy enriched those connected to the court. For everyone else, the wealth of their country remained as remote as it had ever been. And watching all of it was the Shah's secret police, the SAVAK, which monitored, arrested, and in many cases tortured political dissidents. The modernization on the surface was real. The repression underneath it was equally real. Into this space stepped a voice. His name was Ruhollah Khomeini, a Shia cleric, a scholar, and a man who had been preaching against the Shah and American influence for years. The Shah's government exiled him, first to Iraq, then eventually to France. From Paris, his sermons were recorded onto audio cassettes and smuggled back into Iran, passing hand to hand through mosques and religious networks across the country. The message was not complicated. We have been betrayed by our rulers. We have been exploited by foreigners. There is a way to build a just society, and it is not the Shah's way, and it is not America's way. In the cities and in the villages, people listened. By 1979, the Shah's position had become impossible to hold. Economic crisis had returned. Inflation was rising. Protests were spreading from city to city. The army opened fire. The police opened fire. The protests continued anyway. On February 1st, 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini landed at Tehran's Mehrabad airport. The crowds waiting for him numbered in the millions. 10 days later, the Shah's government collapsed. The Islamic Republic of Iran was declared. Its founding principles were three: governance based on Islamic law, full independence from foreign powers, and, stated openly, built into the ideology of the new state, principled opposition to the United States of America. The country that had been America's closest ally in the Middle East had become, in a matter of weeks, its most determined enemy. And the reasons for that transformation had been building, quietly and without resolution, since 1953.